Okay, applications for topic 1, arousal and anxiety. So we've got cognitive behavioural therapy, so we can reduce our anxiety levels in sports, and we've got biofeedback, which is to manage arousal. So we're managing cognition, Faisal and Hardy's focus, and managing arousal, the more kind of drive theory focus. So CBT is commonly used to tackle anxiety and depression generally, but is used in sport. Whilst biofeedback works on somatic anxiety, so we're going to talk about biofeedback in a minute, that's the physiological. CBT works on the cognitive. So if an athlete believes he or she will perform poorly in a competitive setting, he or she is more likely to perform poorly, as his or her thoughts will lead to more anxiety. CBT would help this athlete by changing these thought processes. So what we think affects how we feel, what we actually do affects how we think and feel, and what we feel affects how we think, what we think and do. So our emotion, thoughts and behaviour are linked, and CBT tries to change the thoughts, and therefore that is going to impact the emotions and the behaviour, and it all starts to work to reinforce each other in a more healthy, less anxious way. But we're trying to address the thoughts and therefore the behaviour. You might within CBT also deal with some behavioural factors and emotional factors. So you might be asked to try things out before the next session. You might be asked to practice relaxation techniques for emotion. So there are elements to all of them, but cognitive aspects, talking about your thoughts initially, is the first focus. So the first stage, Pug and Pummel identify 3 aspects of assessment. Precipitating factors, what triggers anxiety? So a particular sporting situation. You talk to the athlete and you say, what is it that stops me? Go, it's when I'm filmed, or it's when my friends are watching. It's when the coach is there, the harsh coach. Predisposing factors, early experiences. Where did the tendency for anxiety come from? Where was it acquired? Was it excessive pressure from parents? So you won't focus on that for too long with CBT, because they're not looking back like psychodynamic therapists do at childhood conflicts, but you might just have a look at it and acknowledge where it's coming from. And then maintaining factors. What factors lead to the anxiety being maintained? Does the coach put pressure on? Are there sponsorship deals that stops them winning regularly? Is there something that this athlete is doing that means that the anxiety gets maintained, gets reinforced? Are they avoiding situations? Do they pretend they've got an injury on certain days when particular coaches are in where the pressure's going to be? So dysfunctional automatic thoughts are then identified. These include things like, I mustn't lose, my opponents are probably better than me. So those aren't necessarily helpful. Tennis players, if Andy Murray didn't always win, but he had the attitude that, right, this is a long-term process, that, I didn't win that, but it doesn't mean I have to hang up my racket and go home. He eventually won Wimbledon, even though he was rubbish to begin with. I mean, not rubbish compared to me. Therapist then puts together a hypothesis about how precipitating, predisposing and maintaining factors lead to the automatic thoughts, which in turn produce anxiety. So remember, anxiety is an autonomic response, so it's a bodily response, anxiety, from thoughts. So it's an immediate response, like a phobia. You don't think that you're scared of the spider, you are scared of the spider in that moment. It's automatic. Including high physiological arousal. And so this is shared with the athletes. So the therapists will tell them this is probably where it's coming from. This is how all of your thoughts and things are coming together to create the anxiety. The athlete and the therapist then work together to test the validity of automatic thoughts. Some of these are probably irrational and can be challenged. E.g., an athlete might say, I know I'm going to lose. A therapist would probably not say that this analysis was untrue, but they might ask the athlete to look closely at the evidence for the claim. Like, if this is actually an athlete sat in front of you, they've probably been quite successful. If they're not, in a different job, their job is to be an athlete. then they probably do win quite a lot. So you get them to challenge those assumptions. So an example of modifying an automatic thought via CBT. Situation might be before a match. The mood, they might rate anxiety as 80%. The automatic thoughts, everyone is better than me. I will lose this match. And by the way, this would be written down by the therapist or the participant. Evidence that supports hot thought. So the hot thought is this. Everyone's better than me. I lost my previous match. The person I'm playing won their previous 4 matches in a row. So that's the evidence that you're using. Evidence that does not support it, you then get them to think about that. Tell me what that is. I've only lost 2 in the last 6 matches, and the other player has lost matches before 2. So, balanced thought, you get them to come to a conclusion. Although I may lose this match, I may also win, as I've done before. If I do lose, there will be other opportunities. So they try and get them to rationalise between the 2 beliefs. Mood, then, potentially drops. So anxiety is only at 50% rather than 80%. Okay, and by going over these kind of modifying automatic thoughts, that are different thoughts, then you address these different anxieties. Okay, CBT can also involve working with deeper core beliefs, negative core beliefs. So, therapist, what was going through your mind immediately before the match? I was thinking that I was definitely going to lose. And what would losing mean to you? That people won't accept me as an athlete. So what would that say about you? That I'm a loser, I'm a failure. So that could be what's called a core belief, that they're a failure. This kind of belief is common but very dysfunctional. Core beliefs can be challenged by arguments, or the therapist might set the athlete the task of asking 10 people whether they agree with the athlete and then collating the results. So obviously, hopefully the 10 people that they ask aren't going to say that they're a loser and a failure. But the challenge there is persuading the athlete to believe those 10 people. But challenging core beliefs is a common aspect of CBT. So evaluation, validity of the measures. So again, to access anxiety, we've got to be careful because we're using self-reports. To access the effectiveness of CBT, we have to ask them, how anxious are you now compared to before? There's a lot of social desirability there. You've sat with a therapist and you've gone through and they've worked really hard for you. And at the end of it, are you going to sit there and go, I'm still 80%? Some people might, but a lot would go, well, 50% now to make the therapist feel good, potentially. So social desirability is a big issue. An athlete's unlikely to admit to a coach if he or she suffers from a cognitive anxiety for fear of not being chosen to play in the following season. Athletes get dropped very easily, and if they're perceived as not being mentally tough enough, then they can get dropped. So there's a lot of pressure there. Counter-argument's very useful, helps to regulate cognitive aspects of sport and anxiety. So Turner and Baker, it's a nice one to note. Turner and Baker, 2013, describe the use of REBT, which is a form of CBT, emphasising vigorous argument with any beliefs that might impact on performance. With 4 elite youth cricketers, in all 4 cases, competition anxiety was significantly reduced. So a nice little example of where it can work there with Turner and Baker. Issues, research tackling very small samples. Previous research successfully demonstrated that biofeedback and CBT is effective in regulating sport and anxiety. So the research has been very, very small samples because, again, getting athletes who are willing to admit that they need to see a therapist for this is difficult. Larger samples are needed to establish how effective they are and what proportion of athletes benefit from them. Okay, so you can link that to less useful or practical applications or low population validity. Any of those issues work there. Debate. CBT looks into how our thoughts and physiological arousal can work together. So you could argue that CBT and cognitive therapies are more holistic than some others. Ethics. CBT sometimes involve directly changing behaviour as well as conditions. This can, for example, involve desensitising people to situations that trigger anxiety or behavioural activation. So getting people to back in the habit of doing things rather than remaining passive. So that's a good thing, but the counter argument is that you can put people under distress by challenging negative core beliefs. If you're digging into their childhood or their core beliefs that they are worthless and things like that, that can obviously be difficult when perhaps they didn't need that. Perhaps they're just nervous when BBC are watching them. Second application, biofeedback. If you haven't got this, then just take bullet pointed notes on it. Biofeedback is a strategy to help people exert better control over their physiology. So this is about the arousal. How can you control what your body is doing? Arousal and anxiety involve physiological changes such as increased heart rate and blood pressure. They're controlled by the autonomic nervous system, which works independently of our consciousness. Although we cannot directly perceive our heart rate and blood pressure, they have a direct impact on how we feel. For example, when we feel anxious, part of this unpleasant sensation will be the result of a higher than usual heart rate and blood pressure. The principle behind biofeedback is that the reason why we cannot normally control functions such as blood pressure and heart rate is because we can't perceive them. So biofeedback tries to allow people to accurately judge their physiological state. Okay, this is almost like watching an Apple Watch that's telling you how your heart rate's doing or how your health is doing. Getting people to see immediate feedback and allow them to control it. So this is essentially how it works. You have something measuring your heart rate, etc. There's a feedback device, an audio-visual display, so a computer screen, and you can see what's going on. And if you go in, oh, my heart is pumping, right, really fast, then you see it happening on the screen, and you use some relaxation techniques. Breathe deeply. What's the app? Headspace app, which is mindfulness. And then you start seeing the audio-visual display is slowing down, and you're reinforcing your body to relax. So there's a picture of it, and you can see when the spikes are, and right, I need to slow this down, I need to relax. So one will be for muscle tension, one can be for heart rate. So different ones. EMG is the electromyography, so that's the activity in the muscles. So EMG is your muscle measures. EEG is your brain waves, how much activity is going on in your brain. GSR is your skin response, so the measures the sweatiness of your palms. Heart rate variability, measures the variability between heart rates. Heartbeats measured by an ECG, so electrocardiogram. And the PST, peripheral skin temperature, measures skin temperature, believe it or not. So there we go, all those things indicate anxiety. You're hooked up to it, and you see all of those things changing. Condren et al., nice one to throw into the answer, suggests that Caitlin in the scenario should use EMGs, EEGs, GSR with her patients to try and get them to be better athletes by managing their physiological arousal. Each of these is a measure of physiological arousal, which in turn is a measure of anxiety and distress. And anxiety, for example, is increased sweating, reduced skin temperature, increased muscle activity. Electrodes are held in each hand. The more anxious the person becomes, the more they sweat, the more conductive their skin becomes, more current passes between the electrodes, and the person successfully reduces their anxiety. They can see the voltage decline as they calm down. So anxiety is reduced by means of relaxation techniques. So it allows them to do it in real time, successfully reducing anxiety. And there you go, there is your second in-depth suggestion. So if you need to take any the bullet points down, if you're missing any of them, perhaps go back to this page and pause there. Okay, thanks for listening.